Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Cynicalex, and today I want to talk about CTPs because it's been on everybody's mind for a few days now for some strange reason, not from anything I've done, and I've also wanted to upgrade and update the CTP guide for a while because I figure, you know, we're gambling for CTPs. There's a lot of emphasis on CTPs. Other people are gambling, or they have existing CTPs, or they have CTP selectors, what have you, and they don't know who to put them on. I'm getting a huge influx lately of questions as well, so it's the absolute perfect time to, instead of throwing my money out there, throwing my knowledge out there to you guys and putting together a brand new list. And here we go. This is the new Marvel Future Fight CTP and Obelisk guide. The Obelisk part of the guide is a bit incomplete at the moment. This is something that I was able to put together in just a day. I only had a day to work on this, so it's definitely far from perfect. It's definitely far from 100% comprehensive. It's very hard to have a list that, you know, deals with almost 190 characters and gives suggestions for CTPs and obelisks for them. It's a tremendously difficult task to undertake. It's a lot more difficult than a tier list or a snapshot or a Shadowland guide. And so because of that, what I've done is instead I've tried to focus it down and distill it into a more important list of names for the time being. I definitely do want to expand this list in the future. I definitely want to put and eventually have all of the names on this list here. Don't get me wrong, but if you're looking for a specific character that doesn't appear here, you're more likely than not going to have to go to the bottom there to the old CTP guide, which personally I hate. I just don't like it. Some of the information here is outdated. A lot of the new information in this CTP guide is not in the old CTP guide. I just thought it was kind of redundant to put it in both places. So what I would say is look here first. If you don't find your character, if you don't find your CTP, then go there. Additionally, you will see, I just want to cover everything, but the things that you're not seeing is you're seeing gaps. So not everything is filled out, and although we do have 20 spots here, and I'm actually hiding the last one with my camera, but it's empty. I can prove it to you right here. Even though there are 20 spots, that's just a random, kind of semi-random number that I chose, and because there are gaps, it means that there's just not enough information. I've barely talked to people who have used Juggernaut or Agent Anti-Venom with a CTP of Rage. So there's just not enough information. The CTP of Rage hasn't been out for long enough. Not enough people have gotten their hands on one, and therefore not enough people have tested it, myself included. So it's just impossible to give you 20 good suggestions. And I don't want to throw bad suggestions on this list. I don't even want to throw so-so suggestions on this list because I know people are going to use this list and they're going to take it seriously. Now, given that people are going to take it seriously, I have to say, of course, as always, this is my opinion, guys. This is my interpretation of the game and my interpretation of how you can best use these characters with these CTPs. I could be wrong, and you may want to, you definitely want to consider your own opinion as well as mine. Also consider your playstyle. Also consider what you're trying to get out of the game. In light of that, in trying to figure out how you want to play the game, I decided to section off the CTPs by their actual value. So if you're strictly looking for a PvE CTP, you generally want to either consider energy or rage. It wouldn't really make sense to say, okay, I want to dominate World Boss Ultimate, and then I'm going to use it as Transcendent CTP. It just doesn't really make sense. Alternatively, if you want to do strictly or exclusively or mostly PvP, these are the CTPs you want to hope to get or kind of gamble for or strategically work towards with legendary battles. Destruction is interesting because it's actually a mixed PvE, PvP CTP, and it's actually preferred for specific characters in that position. And then we finally have Transcendence and Patience. Now, despite what you may hear, they're not very good. They're not bad CTPs, but they're not very good. They're not really considered best for either PvP or PvE for any character in the game. Loki is a rare exception, but even Loki is not really very good in the game anymore. He just lacks damage, and he's basically just a Shadowland character or a very, very low-scoring universal villain. In order to cover some of the obelisk value in relation to CTPs, I also have here on the side, and I have to scroll to show you, so I don't want to keep scrolling here, so I'll cover it now. I have basically what is a similar obelisk to a CTP of Destruction, Regeneration, Authority, and Refinement. Now, I don't list anything for Energy, Rage, Transcendence, or Patience because those don't have replacements. And this is kind of the core idea, one of the core ideas that I want to illustrate and I want to explain so that you can visually see and kind of figure out in your own head how you want to apply it to certain characters. Because the way that CTPs work, they have a main value to them, and if you don't necessarily need that main value, then you might as well, or you may substitute them for an obelisk. So for example, the destruction CTP, its main value is the penetration chance, but if you take away that penetration chance, well, what is the CTP of destruction? It's basically just a guard break, crit, or crit damage damage proc. That's it. That's all it is. It's really not that complicated. Whereas with a CTP of energy or a CTP of rage, you can't really mimic those values in the same way. Sure, with a CTP of energy, you could remove the chain hit damage, and it's just a proc with ignore, dodge, and crit damage. But then it's not really the same type of obelisk at all, and it doesn't necessarily benefit the same characters in the same way, because chain hit is a much more rare thing to have. Very few characters have chain hit on their skills, almost none. I think Gambit's one of the only characters in the game that actually has chain hit on a skill, whereas tons of characters have the destruction effect, the penetration chance. They have that on their skills, they have it on their tier 3 skill, or they have it in their passive effect. So it's totally different. Rage as well, it doesn't exist anywhere on any stats for any character or any kind of passive effect, and so giving you a similar obelisk to a rage CTP would be what? A dodge crit damage proc? It doesn't really even come close to replicating the stats. But for these four, you can come pretty close. For regeneration, you'd look for something like guard break max HP or guard break recovery invincibility. For authority, you'd go for guard break crit invincibility or just missing that accumulation. And for refinement, you'd go for max HP invincibility, or max HP recovery invincibility, or possibly recovery invincibility, although that would be kind of weird. But that is kind of the main, one of the main pillars and ideas that I want to illustrate. And I illustrate that idea again with the little box, which you recognize from the tier list. Obelisks can work. Now, what this means is that for the characters that have the box there, you can use an obelisk with specific stats, not any obelisk, but an obelisk with specific stats will give you almost as much performance as the CTP will. So for example, Luna Snow, energy CTP is great for her. She's one of the best characters in the game for PvE content, especially World Boss Ultimate, but also Extreme Alliance Battle and high level Shadowlands, so she basically does it all. And of course GBR, she's insane. But if you have, a very high damage double cold damage proc, like 35%, so 70% cold damage and a 200 proc, you might perform just as well as a CTP of energy. It may be very hard to see the difference, or perhaps you have like a 40% cold, 35% crit damage, 200 proc. Now these are very rare obelisks, don't get me wrong, but the point is that the chain hit damage, while it is very good for Luna, she can get other buffs from obelisks that the CTP of energy doesn't have that can kind of balance it out. However, there is no stat you can give Cable that's going to replicate the CTP of energy's chain hit damage, and the chain hit damage synergizes so well with Cable's 4 cancel 3 cancel 2 cancel 5 that it's just unbeatable. So if a character doesn't have the little present and they're on this list, you should assume, anywhere on this list, you should assume that the CTP is not replaceable. It's very difficult to replace it with an obelisk or another CTP and have the same results. If you give Cable a CTP of destruction, he's no longer going to be number 1 on this list. Dream on, baby. It doesn't work like that, because that core that main idea of the CTP, which is the chain hit damage, is taken away. So other examples, of course, Scarlet Witch, mind damage proc obelisks, you guys already know that. Ghost Panther would be fire damage, Emma Frost and Psylocke would also be mind damage. In the case of Quicksilver, while the penetration is nice, he already has 70% base penetration, so you could just give him a guard break dodge proc, which is what I have, or a guard break ignore dodge proc. All of those are very, very good for Quicksilver. He doesn't do as well with invincibility because he just wants to kill before he gets killed, so that's why you go with a proc, and the guard break is kind of mandatory for PvP, and so that third stat is kind of flexible, but the destruction portion of the obelisk or CTP is not the most important part for Quicksilver, whereas it is for Captain Marvel. She needs that penetration because she doesn't have any natively except on her tier 3 skill, so you need that penetration on the CTP of Destruction in order to kill enemies when they go into their invincibility. Same thing goes for Spider-Man and Wolverine. However, Weapon Hex and War Machine, they're here because they need that guard break immunity. They're better with a proc than with invincibility, but they need that guard break, otherwise they're going to suffer in any kind of PvE game mode, like World Boss. Weapon Hex will not stop getting guard broken by Cull Obsidian if you don't give her a guard break proc Obelisk. A CTP of Destruction is great, but it's not necessary. Same thing goes for Psylocke with the mind damage. With her tier 2, she gives herself penetration. With the regenerations, it's about the HP shield. So in Deadpool's case, he could do just as well with a guard break, recovery rate, invincibility Obelisk. He could do almost as well as he could with a CTP of regeneration. Now, of course, regeneration is going to have more stats. It's got recovery and max HP and guard break. So right there, you've got those 3 stats that Deadpool can't have on top of invincibility. And you can't roll that many stats on the Obelisk anyways, because one of them has to be some sort of proc effect. And so because of that, you can't really replicate all of the stats, but you can replicate enough of them that it makes it possible to replace. So that's kind of the explanation for these little presents, and that's why they're not on every single character. Now, as far as the actual numbers go, I think some people are going to be confused. I tried my best to put at least the first 5 or so of each different CTP as well ranked as I could, mostly considering not only the character's rank in the game, that's super important, how powerful the character is, but also how much better it makes the character. So for example, Captain Marvel may not be the absolute best character for ABX. There are of course characters that score higher, like Luna Snow can score 10 million with a CTP of Rage. Yes, Luna Snow can, and if I was just going off of the scores, Luna Snow would be number 1 with the CTP of Rage. However, Luna Snow can get 3.5 million with a CTP of Energy. So why do you need to get 10 million with a CTP of Rage? You're not really improving anything. You're already way over the ceiling. On the other hand, Captain Marvel with a CTP of Energy only scores about 2 million, and she can barely, crack stage 40, 45 of World Boss Ultimate. But you slap a CTP of Rage on her and she suddenly jumps to 3.5 million ABX score, and I can do stage 50 of Ebony Maw. Ebony Maw, stage 50 with the CTP of Rage, no problem. But you can see that it's not necessarily better for every single character. So for example, Minerva here for the Energy CTP, while the Rage CTP might be slightly better for Minerva than Energy, the fact that Energy is a lot more readily available as a CTP. The rarity of the CTP is also very important. I tried not to put too many repeat characters, although, it would be easy to put all of the best characters on all of these CTPs. In reality, we're not going to give the Refinement CTP to our best characters because it's not the best CTP. It's not the best for PvE because it has no proc, and it's not the best for PvP because it has no guard break immunity. So I tried to put characters here that can still work with the CTP of Refinement, but you have to understand what the CTP of Refinement does and doesn't do in order to understand. If you hate getting guard broken and stun locked by Quicksilver with Wolverine, and you want to use Wolverine in a timeline, you would not give him a CTP of Refinement because he will get guard broken if you don't dodge those Quicksilver teams by refreshing. So in that case, you would need to give him an Authority CTP, or you would need to give him a Regen or some other Obelisk with guard break immunity. But if you're not using Wolverine for that specific type of fight, or if you're going to avoid that specific type of fight and just fight Captain Marvels who don't guard break immune as much or guard break, then you won't have to worry about it. So you definitely need to consider not only the character's placement, but also the CTP's function and also what you want to get out of it. The rest of the numbers after 5 are honestly very debatable. I mean, you could definitely say certain characters on here should be higher than others. This isn't to say definitely if you have Captain America and Corvus Glaive that Captain America deserves your 7th or your 6th CTP of regeneration before Corvus. I don't really know how often you play with Corvus versus Captain America. So don't focus too much on these numbers. They're really only super or sort of important for like the first 3 or 5. Beyond that, it's honestly what you have and what you need. So if you're really focused on ABX and you don't really care about World Boss and you don't really care about Shadowland or GBR, Cable is a really important one for a CTP of Energy. So is Luna. Deadpool, you can honestly skip Deadpool because you're not going to use him for ABX because you have Luna. You can also skip Sharon Rogers because you've got Cable and Luna. You can also skip Gambit. So you see what I'm saying? If you really understand your focus before you look at this, you'll be able to kind of distill it even further in terms of what you want. But it's really impossible, and it would be really impractical for me to try to make a list that perfectly analyzed all of these things, because on the one hand, Gambit is really good for World Boss Ultimate with a CTP of energy. That's why I wanted to put him at number 5, and he's also very good for Shadowland, and he's decent for GBR, but he has basically no value in ABX. But if I overvalue ABX, Gambit is going to fall to like 19th, and it's not really going to make sense, because honestly, Gambit is really good with a CTP of energy. But you have to see what you want the character to be doing first, and then you want to then calculate, you know, how much do I want to gain, or how much am I trying to, where am I trying to get to, and what do I need to put into it. So another thing to also consider is the Rage CTP. A lot of people are going to say, well, Cynicalex, you should just put every ABX character here, because obviously the Rage CTP is better for every single ABX character in the game. Yes and no. Now, for most characters that have been tested so far, they are better with a CTP of Rage. I don't want to try and hide that too much, but I do want to demystify some of the cynicism, because on the one hand, Rage CTPs are super rare. I mean, you can ask me, I've already spent, what, like 3,600 crystals? 36,000 crystals? No, 26,000 crystals. We're going to be spending 36. I'm already predicting the next video. But yeah, I mean, you could spend thousands of crystals and turn up with none, whereas you're automatically going to have 2 CTPs of energy just by completing chapter 13 and doing Hela's uniform, getting her uniform to mythic. So the availability of a CTP of energy is way more important in that sense than Rage. So while, you know, it might be better for, you know, some of these characters that you're going to use in ABX anyways, if you can get by, or you can get as very close to the same score with a CTP of energy, why would you bother with a CTP of Rage in that case? So I also wanted to consider the rarity of these CTPs. I wanted to consider the impact on the character, the impact on the game mode, how much better they get, and how good the character is overall. I'm really excited to hear how you guys you know, react to this and what you think of this list. Do you think it's better? Is it easier to read? How much information is missing? What else should I put? And yeah, any other advice and suggestions you have, I'm welcome to discuss it with you guys. And I'm looking forward to perfecting this, because it's far from perfect, but I'm looking to perfect it with your help and your advice and your suggestions. So hit me up in the comments down below. Hit me up on Discord and Twitter. And of course, if you like what you see, I hope to see you again tomorrow. Take care.